The Bermuda Triangle, where ships vanish, planes disappear, and science still has no solid answers. Here are 10 chilling mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle you won't believe. Number 1. The Flight 19. The real events of December 5, 1945. Flight 19 was a routine training mission consisting of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale. The flight was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, with 4 other pilots and 9 crew members total aboard the aircraft. These were experienced military aviators conducting a standard navigation exercise over the Atlantic. The mission plan was straightforward: fly east from Fort Lauderdale to conduct bombing practice at a small island, then continue east before turning north and finally west to return to base. This formed a triangular flight path that should have taken about 2 hours. Around 3:45 in the afternoon, radio communications revealed that Lieutenant Taylor had become disoriented. The crucial detail here is that Taylor believed his compass was malfunctioning and that he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually over the Bahamas. This geographical confusion is key to understanding what followed. Taylor's radio transmissions, which were recorded, show his growing confusion. He said, "I don't know where we are. We must have got lost after that last turn." When other pilots suggested flying west toward Florida, Taylor refused because he believed they were already over the Gulf of Mexico and that flying west would take them further out to sea. As Flight 19 continued flying in the wrong direction, a search and rescue operation was launched. A PBM Mariner flying boat with 13 crew members took off to search for the missing aircraft. Tragically, this rescue plane exploded shortly after takeoff, killing all aboard. A nearby ship witnessed the explosion and found debris, confirming this separate accident. The factual resolution. Flight 19 most likely ran out of fuel and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The planes were flying further east over deep water rather than toward the Florida coast, making recovery of wreckage extremely difficult in 1945. The official Navy investigation concluded that the disaster resulted from Taylor's navigation error and his decision to continue flying east instead of west. How legend transformed fact. Now here's where the story becomes fascinating from a cultural perspective. The Flight 19 incident remained a relatively straightforward case of navigation error and tragedy until the 1960s, when writer Vincent Gaddis coined the term Bermuda Triangle and began weaving various disappearances into a supernatural narrative. The transformation of Flight 19 into a mystery involved several key distortions. Authors claimed that Taylor's radio transmissions included references to strange phenomena, but these quotes don't appear in the actual transcripts. They suggested that the planes vanished without a trace in calm weather, when in fact they crashed in rough seas after becoming lost. The complexity of the real navigation error was simplified into an inexplicable disappearance. Number 2. The USS Cyclops. In 1918, a massive Navy cargo ship vanished with 309 men aboard. No SOS, no wreck. It remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in United States Navy history. The USS Cyclops case offers us a fascinating lens through which to examine how a genuine historical mystery can become entangled with supernatural folklore. This ship's disappearance in 1918 presents both a legitimate puzzle and an excellent example of how gaps in historical evidence can be filled with increasingly dramatic explanations over time. Let me guide you through this story step by step, starting with the historical facts and then exploring how this case became woven into Bermuda Triangle mythology. Understanding the USS Cyclops, the ship, and its mission. The USS Cyclops was not an ordinary vessel. Built in 1910, this massive cargo ship was designed specifically for the U.S. Navy's auxiliary fleet. Picture a floating warehouse. The ship was nearly 500 feet long with enormous cargo holds designed to carry heavy bulk materials. Its primary purpose was to transport vital supplies across the Atlantic, particularly during World War I when such logistical support was crucial. By March 1918, the Cyclops was carrying 10,800 tons of manganese ore from Barbados to Baltimore. This detail is more important than it might first appear. Manganese ore is extremely dense and heavy. This cargo put enormous strain on the ship's structure. Think of it like loading a truck beyond its weight limit, but with the added complexity of a wooden and steel ship dealing with. The ship was commanded by Lieutenant Commander George Worley, a German-born officer whose background later became controversial. Worley had a reputation for being erratic and honestly pretty dictatorial with his crew. Understanding his leadership style becomes relevant when we consider what might have happened during the voyage. The crew consisted of 306 men, including the commander. This was a substantial group of people who simply vanished with the ship. When you're examining a maritime mystery, the human element, the decisions made by the crew and commander, often proves more important than any environmental factors. Let me walk you through the Cyclops' final journey step by step, because the sequence of events reveals important clues about what likely occurred. The ship departed from Barbados on March 4, 1918, with its destination being Baltimore. The voyage should have taken approximately 5 to 6 days under normal conditions. However, the ship had been experiencing engine problems during its stay in Barbados, and one of its 2 engines was not functioning properly. This means the Cyclops was traveling on reduced power. Imagine trying to drive a heavy truck up a mountain with only half your engine working. The weather during this period was not particularly severe, but the ship was traversing an area known for rough seas. The combination of overloading with heavy cargo, reduced engine power, and typical Atlantic weather conditions created a dangerous situation. Here's where the mystery begins. The USS Cyclops was never seen again after leaving Barbados. No distress signal was received, no wreckage was found, and no survivors were ever discovered. From a historical perspective, this complete lack of evidence is actually quite telling about what likely happened. In 1918, ship-to-shore radio communication was still relatively primitive. Unlike today's sophisticated maritime communication systems, a ship could easily sink without being able to send a distress signal. The absence of such a signal doesn't necessarily indicate anything mysterious, it simply reflects the technological limitations of the era. The Ellen Austin case presents us with one of the most intriguing examples of how maritime folklore can transform a potentially real incident into something far more mysterious than the historical evidence actually supports. This story offers us a perfect opportunity to develop our skills in distinguishing between documented history and embellished legend. Let me guide you through this case as if we were maritime historians examining the evidence together, starting with what we can actually verify and then exploring how this story has been transformed over time. Before we examine the specific claims about the Ellen Austin, we need to understand what shipping and maritime communication were like in 1881. This context is crucial because, honestly, many aspects of the story that seem mysterious today were simply the realities of 19th century ocean travel. Back in 1881, ships crossing the Atlantic relied primarily on sail power, though some hybrid sail and steam vessels were becoming more common. Communication between ships was limited to visual signals, flags, and maybe, shouted conversations when vessels were close enough. There was no radio communication, no way to call for help from shore, and no systematic way to track the location of ships once they left port. Think of it this way: when 2 ships encountered each other in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, it was kind of like 2 travelers meeting on a remote mountain trail. They might exchange information, help each other out, or make agreements, but there would be no way to verify these interactions later unless multiple witnesses survived to tell the tale. The Ellen Austin was a real ship, operated by the American Shipping Company. This is where our solid historical foundation begins, and unfortunately, where much of our verifiable information also ends. The ship did sail the Atlantic routes during the 1881 time period, and it did encounter various situations that were typical of commercial shipping of that era. However, when we try to trace the specific incident that made the Ellen Austin famous, we encounter a crucial problem that you'll see in many maritime mysteries. The story cannot be found in contemporary records. This absence of documentation is like a red flag for historians, suggesting that the story may have been embellished or even created entirely in later retellings. Let me walk you through the story as it's typically told, while highlighting the elements that should make us skeptical from a historical analysis perspective. According to the legend, the Ellen Austin encountered a mystery ship in the Sargasso Sea, drifting without crew but otherwise in perfect condition. The captain of the Ellen Austin supposedly ordered some of his crew to board the derelict vessel and sail it alongside the Ellen Austin to bring it to port as salvage. Think about this scenario for a moment. From a maritime perspective, this would be a significant decision with serious legal and financial implications. Salvage rights were a major aspect of maritime law, and such an encounter would have generated paperwork, official reports, and documented legal proceedings once the ships reached port. The story continues that the 2 ships became separated in rough weather, and when the Ellen Austin's crew spotted the mystery ship again, they found it once again abandoned, with their own crew members missing. Some versions claim this cycle repeated, with different crew members disappearing each time they attempted to sail the ghost ship. Let me help you develop the analytical skills that maritime historians use when evaluating such stories. There are several elements of this tale that should make us approach it with skepticism, and understanding these can help you analyze similar claims more effectively. Pilots report a strange electronic fog, a swirling cloud that messes with instruments and, seems to follow aircraft. One pilot even claims it warped time. The electronic fog phenomenon represents one of the most fascinating examples of how eyewitness testimony, scientific misunderstanding, and the desire for dramatic explanations can combine to create a compelling, but ultimately problematic part of Bermuda Triangle mythology. Let me guide you through this concept as if we were examining it together in a workshop on how to evaluate unusual claims using scientific thinking. Understanding the foundation. What is electronic fog supposed to be? Before we can analyze the validity of electronic fog claims, we need to understand exactly what proponents of this theory are describing. The concept suggests that certain areas of the ocean, particularly in the so-called Bermuda Triangle, are prone to mysterious cloud formations that interfere with electronic equipment, cause disorientation in pilots and sailors, and may even distort time and space. Think of it this way. The claim is that these clouds are not just meteorological phenomena, but have some kind of electromagnetic or even more exotic properties that can affect navigation instruments, compasses, engines, and even human perception. The idea is that aircraft or ships entering these clouds may experience system failures, become disoriented, or even emerge to find that time has passed differently than expected. This concept is important to understand because it represents an attempt to provide a scientific-sounding explanation for various mysterious incidents. Rather than suggesting supernatural forces, the electronic fog theory tries to propose something that sounds plausible within the framework of known science, even though it actually contradicts our understanding of how weather and electromagnetic phenomena work. The origin story, Bruce Gernon and the genesis of electronic fog. Let me walk you through the specific incident that gave birth to the electronic fog concept, because understanding this story will help you develop better skills for evaluating similar claims. In 1970, pilot Bruce Gernon was flying from the Bahamas to Florida when he reported encountering what he later described as electronic fog. According to Gernon's account, he entered a strange cloud formation that seemed to tunnel around his aircraft. He claimed that his compass spun wildly, his electronic equipment malfunctioned, and he emerged from the cloud to find that his journey had taken significantly less time than it should have. He suggested that he had somehow traveled through time or space in a way that cannot be explained by conventional physics. Now let's examine this story with the careful attention that any unusual claim deserves. When we evaluate such reports, we need to consider several factors: the reliability of the witness, the possibility of misinterpretation, the consistency of the story over time, and most importantly, whether the claimed phenomenon is consistent with our understanding of how the natural world works. To properly evaluate electronic fog claims, we need to understand some basic principles of meteorology and electromagnetic science. This knowledge will help you develop the foundation for analyzing not just this particular theory, but any claim that involves weather or electromagnetic effects. Weather systems can indeed create unusual cloud formations, and severe weather can produce strong electromagnetic effects. For example, thunderstorms generate powerful electromagnetic fields that can interfere with electronic equipment. Cumulonimbus clouds can produce lightning, which creates electromagnetic pulses that can affect sensitive electronics. However, there are fundamental limitations to how these natural phenomena work. Weather systems follow the laws of physics, which include conservation of energy and the propagation of electromagnetic waves. There is no known mechanism by which a weather system could create the types of effects described in electronic fog theory, particularly the claim that time or space could be distorted. Think of it this way. If we discovered that certain weather systems could actually bend space and time, it would revolutionize our understanding of physics. Such a discovery would be worthy of multiple Nobel Prizes and would fundamentally change how we understand the universe. The fact that such effects are claimed to occur regularly in a specific geographical area, yet have never been documented scientifically, is a strong indicator that we're dealing with misinterpretation rather than revolutionary physics. Now, let me help you understand a crucial aspect of analyzing claims like electronic fog: the psychology of how people can misinterpret their own experiences, particularly in stressful or unusual situations. This is not about questioning anyone's honesty or intelligence, but rather about understanding how our minds can play tricks on us. When pilots or sailors encounter unusual weather conditions, they may experience disorientation. This is a well-documented phenomenon in aviation medicine. Flying in cloud cover can cause spatial disorientation, where the pilot loses their sense of direction and may feel that the aircraft is behaving strangely. This is so common that pilot training includes extensive instruction on how to recognize and compensate for these effects. Similarly, electronic equipment can malfunction in various weather conditions. Moisture, temperature changes, and electromagnetic fields from storms can all cause compass and electronic navigation problems. These are known issues with well-understood causes, and pilots and mariners are trained to recognize and compensate for them. The crucial point is that when someone experiences equipment failure and disorientation simultaneously, particularly in stressful conditions, they may interpret these known phenomena as something mysterious. The mind naturally seeks patterns and explanations, and dramatic explanations can feel more satisfying than mundane ones. Let me guide you through the process of analyzing one of the most extraordinary claims associated with electronic fog, the idea that people can travel through time or space in ways that violate our understanding of physics. This is an excellent example of how to apply scientific. Number 5. The ghost ship Carroll A. Deering. This 5-masted schooner ran aground in 1921, sails up, dinner on the stove, but the entire crew vanished, never seen again. The Carroll A. Deering case presents us with one of the most fascinating examples of how a genuine historical mystery can be transformed through decades of speculation and retelling. Let me guide you through this story as if we were examining it together in a seminar on historical analysis, building your understanding layer by layer from the solid historical foundation up to the more speculative interpretations. Building the foundation, understanding the ship and its era. Before we can properly analyze what happened to the Carroll A. Deering, we need to understand the world of merchant shipping in 1921. This context is crucial because it helps us evaluate which explanations are plausible and which are simply projections of modern concerns onto a historical event. The Carroll A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner built in 1919 for the G.G. Deering Company of Maine. Picture this massive sailing vessel. It was 255 feet long with towering masts that could catch enormous amounts of wind. These ships represented some of the last commercial sailing vessels of their era, as steam power was rapidly taking over maritime shipping. This was a time when maritime communication was primitive by modern standards. Ships carried no radio equipment, and once they left port, they were essentially isolated from the outside world until they encountered another vessel or reached their destination. Think of it as traveling across a vast wilderness where you might not see another person for weeks. The economic context is equally important. In 1921, the world was experiencing post-World War I economic upheaval. Shipping was becoming increasingly competitive, and the economic pressures on ship owners and crews were intense. This economic stress created conditions where disputes between crew members and officers were common, and where desperate measures might be considered by people facing financial ruin. The final voyage. Following the evidence, step by step. Let me walk you through the Deering's final voyage chronologically, helping you develop the detective-like thinking skills that historians use when analyzing incomplete evidence. Each detail we know provides clues, but we must be careful not to overinterpret the evidence or fill in gaps with speculation. In January 1921, the Carroll A. Deering left Norfolk, Virginia, bound for Rio de Janeiro with a cargo of coal. The ship was commanded by Captain William Merritt, with first mate Charles B. McClellan, and a crew of 10 men. Already, we have important information about the human dynamics aboard the ship. The relationship between captain and crew would prove crucial to understanding what happened. The voyage to Rio appears to have been uneventful, but the return journey immediately presents us with our first mystery. Captain Merritt became ill in Rio and was hospitalized. The shipping company replaced him with Captain W.B. Warmel, and this change in command created tensions that would have significant consequences. Here's where we need to put ourselves in the mindset of sailors in 1921. A change in command during a voyage was a serious matter. The crew had signed on to work under Captain Merritt, and their loyalty was to him personally. When Captain Warmel took over, he was dealing with men who might have viewed him as an outsider, and this dynamic can create serious problems on a ship where discipline and cooperation are essential for survival. The last confirmed sighting, analyzing the evidence. Now let's examine the last confirmed sighting of the Carroll A. Deering with all hands alive. This is where we need to put on our detective hats and analyze the evidence carefully, because this sighting provides crucial clues about what was already going wrong aboard the ship. On January 23, 1921, the ship was spotted by the Cape Lookout lightship off the coast of North Carolina. The lightship keeper later reported that someone from the Deering had hailed them, claiming that the ship had lost its anchors and requesting that this information be reported to the shipping company. This might seem like a minor detail, but it's actually quite significant when we consider what it tells us about the ship's condition and the crew's state of mind. Think about this for a moment. Why would losing anchors be important enough to report to the shipping company? Anchors are expensive and essential for safe navigation, particularly when entering port. More importantly, the request suggests that the crew was worried about their situation and wanted to communicate with the outside world. This is one of the last pieces of evidence we have of the crew trying to maintain normal procedures. But here's where the story becomes even more significant. The lighthouse keeper later reported that the person who hailed them was not acting like a typical first mate. The sailor seemed to be giving orders, while the actual officers were not visible. This detail would later become crucial to understanding what might have happened aboard the ship. The eerie discovery, what the evidence tells us. When we examine the discovery of the abandoned Carroll A. Deering, we need to carefully separate what we know from what we suspect. The ship was found aground on Diamond Shoals, a treacherous area off Cape Hatteras known for shipwrecks. The ship was intact but completely abandoned. No crew, no lifeboats, and mysteriously, no navigational equipment or ship's papers. Let's think about this like detectives examining a crime scene. The absence of the entire crew, all the lifeboats and the ship's papers suggests that the abandonment was planned rather than sudden. If the ship had been abandoned because of immediate danger, you would expect to find some personal belongings, some evidence of hasty departure, or some indication of what caused the crew to leave. Instead, the pattern suggests that someone carefully removed all evidence of the ship's voyage and deliberately took the crew away. This wasn't a case of the crew being swept overboard by a sudden storm. This was a deliberate action by someone who wanted to leave no trace of what had happened. The fact that the ship was still seaworthy when found is also significant. The Deering hadn't been damaged by weather or rocks. It had been deliberately run aground, possibly to hide evidence of whatever had happened to the crew. This is